What's going on, everybody? Welcome into Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Orrico, joined today by Kelly Kirby. She is our resident penguin here at Fantasy Pros, and I would argue if your company doesn't have a resident penguin, you're not a legitimate operation, not in the slightest. Kelly, how are you doing? Great to talk with you. We only do a couple shows a year, so I was really look forward to getting behind the mic with you.
I always look forward to talking to you, probably because we don't have to do it much. I'm like, oh, hey, look, Orrico and I are going to get to chat. No, I agree with you entirely. I think a penguin should be at the top of everyone's list. Everybody knows the Penguins are more interested in baseball in the winter anyway. And so, yeah, I'm totally stoked to do this with you.
Where I am right now, it feels like a penguin could walk by at any moment. It's like negative 15 Celsius. I'm not sure what the conversion is to Fahrenheit, but it's probably like 15 or 20 Fahrenheit. It's bad. It's rough out there. Penguin could come up at any moment. But today we're talking about who we are taking in the first round of our 2026 fantasy baseball drafts. We're ramping up our coverage here. We've already done a bunch of podcasts, and we are going to continue to be ramping up the coverage. So make sure you guys are subscribing to the channel, commenting below. Who are you taking in the first round? Who are you avoiding? Who are players that maybe are going in the second round that you think are first round players? Let us know all that below in the comments. But we are going to be going through the first round. We've broken it up into kind of mini tiers within the rounds. And we're going to start at the top because where else would we start? With Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge. Now, we're looking at the NFBC's ADP for this. I think it's probably the best place to look for ADP this time of year. The major sites that a lot of people play on, the Yahoos and ESPNs, aren't open yet. And NFBC, people are putting real money. A lot of the time it's $50, $150, $250 leagues. So people are putting their money where their mouth is in these formats. At the top, it's Ohtani and Judge. Ohtani goes slightly ahead, but the ADP is 1.2 for Ohtani, 1.9 for Judge. They're kind of alternating as the first pick. Ohtani slightly more often. But Kelly, do you have a strong preference here on who goes as the first pick in 2026 drafts? If you get the first pick, is it an easy decision for you?
It basically is for me. I don't know if it's because I'm not a giant fan of Judge, just in general. But I would go Ohtani. I wouldn't think twice about it. As long as he's like considered one player. How do you put anyone else there? But I get it with Judge. As he gets older, it's like I can't quite shake how the injuries might start to kind of pile up once you get into this age bracket for him. Not that Ohtani's not without his risks, but I mean, I think he could still hit 50 homers even if his arm fell off. So, so I would go Ohtani, but it's like I don't begrudge anyone going Judge at all.
So if you had, let's say you had 10 first overall picks and you knew that going in, what would be the distribution? Would it be 10 Ohtani, or would you maybe go 8-2, 7-3? Where would your head be at there?
I would say 8-2. I'd be okay with 80% exposure. And having a little Judge, that's not going to be a bad thing. And picking second, I feel like that would be also kind of a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, to be the devil's advocate here and to also pose the question of Ohtani's pitching and how that enters into it. And is it a positive or a negative thing? I think it could be perceived as either or. Because if he is accruing pitching stats for you, especially in a points league, I think it's ESPN where you just get both stats on a daily basis. And he is so far and away the number one there. It's not even close. But it also leads to potentially more injury risk. Ariel Cohen did a conference, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago in Arizona, about how Ohtani pitching, it just doubles his injury risk, if not even more than doubles it, because pitchers get hurt more often than position players. Ohtani is coming off of Tommy John a couple years ago. They ramped him back up at the end of 2025. Is that a concern for you at all, that if he gets hurt on the mound and it's serious enough, it could cost him at bats, or is it something that you think is worth it?
Yeah, I have that concern. I think the fact he plays for the Dodgers and the fact that they have kind of cracked a code, mostly because they just go by as much of pitching as they can get their hands on, that I feel like they wouldn't hesitate to expand, to a 6-man rotation or skip him once or twice or whatever. The idea of him having like a catastrophic injury, then we just go back to the idea that like anyone can get injured at any time. And as we continue through the first round, I'm going to say that a lot. But it's very, to me, it's like, yep, that's a risk and it's there. But I also think the Dodgers are like one of the few teams that will adjust around him and make it so like he stays fresh as a batter.
They have the luxury to do that. They're not playing for August and July games. They don't care. They're going to win 100 games. They're in a worst case scenario, 95 games or so. They're going to October and they will slow play certain players. You might see that a little bit with Yamamoto. He's going to pitch in the WBC. The pitching is going to be an interesting thing to discuss for the Dodgers throughout the offseason. They have such a stacked pitching staff, but they may go with, 6-7 guys at certain points just to keep everybody fresh for October. Something in Ohtani's favor, if you're playing in a weekly league, most of the time you are going to put him as a hitter. That's where he will be most valuable. But if you end up really needing a couple of starts from him down the stretch, and you could argue that's when he's more likely to be used by the Dodgers anyway, September, maybe there's a couple of late season starts to get him fresh for the postseason. Maybe you get a 2-start Ohtani week in September and you slide him into the pitching spots. He is just so valuable. I think he is number one with a bullet for me. If somebody wants to argue Aaron Judge was number one this year. I can't really make a case against him other than he is a little bit older. The lineup around him isn't as good, but Aaron Judge and Ohtani are clearly the first 2 picks off the board, and they should be. Moving into the next tier, it's Bobby Witt Jr. at 3.2 ADP, Juan Soto 4.1, Jose Ramirez 5 on the dot. They're all neck and neck right there with each other. Is there any argument, Kelly, to take any of these 3 players over? For you, it would be Aaron Judge because you have Ohtani first. Would there be any argument for Bobby Witt Jr. or Soto or Ramirez over Aaron Judge for you in 2026?
So here's what I'm going to say, and I feel like I'm going to say this a lot in all the podcasts, all the articles I write, everything. At some point, I'm going to admit that there would be maybe some exposure I would want to Jose Ramirez because A, it's like I never get him. B, like third base to me is going to be a little iffy on a few things, and he's just like there's the double. There's like he's so consistent. So again, it's like how much do I hate Aaron Judge or how much do I hate the Yankees? Like that comes into play, but I mean it's nothing compared to you. So of that group, Jose would be the one that I would maybe lean toward, and that's only because shortstop I think is so deep. But I don't see Soto going because I don't think that the stolen bases are going to be there again next year.
Yeah, and that kind of leads to my second question here. Juan Soto just had a ridiculous season. I think he led the major leagues in stolen bases in the second half of 2025. He ended up with 38. Now, if you're looking at early projections, Steamer has him for 20. If I set the over-under on 19 and a half stolen bases, would you say the over? Were we going to see another 20 stolen base season from Soto? His previous high was 12. So I'm a little bit skeptical.
I'm a little skeptical too, but I guess I'm looking at it like, do the Mets run more? The other teams that he's played for, like, was he just given the green light and he was like, okay, I guess I'm going. So I will take the over and prepare to look dumb on it, but all I know is I'm not taking the over. No number above that am I taking like the over on, because I just think unless it is a Mets thing where he has a green light whenever he wants it, again, which could be the case, which is why 12 was always, there, but I don't think he'll get more than 20.
It's hard for me to believe that he will. He's not the quickest guy, and now Josh Naylor kind of proved it to us this year that it's not necessarily a 1-to-1. I think Josh Naylor was first or second percentile in sprint speed. And he's still, I think, 30 was around 30 stolen bases for him. Sometimes it's not a 1-to-1 there, but Juan Soto, it took him the previous 4 or 5 years combined to get up to 38 stolen bases. I would probably lean towards the under, but I think that's roughly where we're going to see it because he's 27 years old now, maybe, which is crazy to think that he's done all this. He's 42 FWAR already at his age. It's crazy to think that he has been so young to this point and so dominant. Maybe he does think that he's just picked up on something that lets him, steal bases a little bit easier. The rules are a little bit easier than when he first broke into the game. All that being said, though, I think 38 was probably the high water mark we're going to see from Juan Soto in his career. Just to mention Bobby Witt Jr., because, people probably think that this was a bit of a down year for him. His batting average went from 332 to 295. His home run total went down. His RBI total went down. But 23 homers, 38 steals, 295 batting average. He had 8 wins above replacement, according to Fangraphs. Another guy who is just on a complete Hall of Fame trajectory. And I think the only thing that holds me back from wanting to say I could take him over Judge is just that scarcity in the outfield compared to shortstop. Shortstop is so deep this year. There are maybe 15 or 16 guys I'd be comfortable with as starters. And especially if you're playing in a 4 or 5 outfielder league, getting Judge there, it really gives you a positional advantage. Not that I want to be bogged down in the first round thinking about positional things, but it does go into the back of your head a little bit.
Especially in leagues where you need 5 of them, right? Like there's an advantage there to having a top 1 or top 2 on the, which would leave your league mates with such a more scarce supply to choose from. It can give you kind of that really large edge in the position. But no, I'm with you. It's yeah, I had the same thought when I looked up all the stats right when the season ended, and I was like, I thought Witt was just kind of, I'm like, oh, he kind of had like a quote unquote good average year. Like if that makes like he's a good player and this is an average year for him. But I'm like, those are stats we would all love to have. So there's nothing against it, which is why I think, we don't want to like be married to positional scarcity in the first round. But in that case, I think it's like, well, we can kind of take it into consideration here. But yeah.
We call this maybe a down year for Bobby Witt Jr., and he was the 10th overall player according to
Exactly.
Fangraphs. So if that's the floor, he's about as safe as it gets. Now, are we in agreement that these are the consensus top 5? It's Ohtani, it's Judge, it's Witt, it's Soto, and it's Ramirez, however you want to arrange those last 3. Is that the top 5?
That is my top 5, yeah. Pretty easily, actually. So.
Yeah, I think so too. I think we do have a little bit of a gap, and we're going to talk about that right after a word from our new presenting sponsor of the show, and that is Hard Rock Bet. Today's show is brought to you by our new presenting sponsor, Hard Rock Bet. If you haven't tried, place your first bet on Hard Rock Bet. There's still time for you to get 150 in bonus bets if you win. Just place a $5 bet, and if it hits, you get not only your winnings, but 150 in extra bonus bets. Download the Hard Rock Bet app and make your first deposit today. Now we're going to talk about a couple of pitchers that are going in the first round. They do kind of break up the first group of hitters because you do see Tarik Skubal with an ADP of 7, Paul Skenes with an ADP of 10, and Garrett Crochet with an ADP of 11. There's a couple hitters we are going to double back on, but because Skubal is going regularly right after that first group of hitters, it felt appropriate to just talk about those hitters or those pitchers as a group right here. So Kelly, I'll start off. Is it a good year to take a pitcher in the first round if you end up drawing the 6th, 7th, 8th pick? Is Tarik Skubal or Paul Skenes or Garrett Crochet a name that you'd consider taking in that range?
No, not 6, 7, or 8. Or really probably even 9. Those next 4, I feel like you need to establish. You need to have a hitter that can kind of hold down all 5 categories if you can get it. Pitchers are a much scarier proposition in the first round just because, I look at it like, as dumb as it sounds, like here's a guy, he only plays once every 5 days, versus like I can accumulate stats from these other guys, pretty much every day. And like you said, it's also, when you talk about injury risk, if we're saying that the pitcher, it's just strictly pitchers, you're taking on a little bit more of that, I think, because they're more likely to, have something that gets them shut down for some of the year. And then you're looking at your first round pick really not contributing. So for me, not in that next group of 4. I won't. But what about you?
I think that I can be talked into it, but I agree that I think I want it to be maybe even just a couple of picks later. Like if it's between Skubal and, the Corbin Carrolls, Ellie De La Cruzes, we're going to talk about that group of hitters coming up. But like you mentioned, we're getting everyday type of production. And yes, it's a different scale because you're not getting everyday production from any pitcher. But still, if I'm taking a guy in the first round, I kind of want that anchor of he's in there every single day. There's not going to be a little bit of an arm strain that means for 2 whole weeks, I don't get anything, or 3 weeks, maybe a month plus, I don't get anything from those pitchers. These pitchers that we're talking about are all guys who throw incredibly hard, who have logged a lot of innings over the last couple of years. And that does kind of put them in a bracket of, are they going to be able to do this again? Skubal's been the number 1 pitcher 2 consecutive years. Off the top of my head, I can't remember a pitcher being number 1 for 3 consecutive seasons in fantasy. There does tend to be a little bit of variance. Maybe Kershaw did it. I think
Kershaw did it, like the 2014, 15, 16, that run. But, by the end, he wasn't worth the first round. So, yeah.
It's hard. It's really hard for me to say too much against these guys because they were so dominant last year. They carried teams, but now the price is just a little bit more expensive. Skubal and Skenes were going in the first last year, but it was more end of the first. Now it's more mid first. Crochet was pretty firmly a second rounder. Now he is firmly a first rounder. If you're picking on the turn, Kelly, like let's say you draw a pick at the end, whether it's a 12-teamer or a 15-teamer, one pitcher and one hitter, does that strategy make sense to you this year, you think? If you can go, Lindor and Crochet or something like that, would that be something that piques your interest?
Yeah, I think so. I think it changes to 12 to 15 would change it just a little bit for me, where I'd be way more interested in picking one of these three guys. If I'm in the 13, 14, or 15th pick slot, like I'd be super fine taking one and then grabbing a hitter on the way back. 12 team, I'm a little bit more. If Mike Mayer was here, he would start drilling me on whether pocket aces would be a good strategy. Like, what do you take two of them? But I think that I could definitely justify one of them if I had like an 11 or 12 pick.
Yeah, and a 12-teamer, I know it's said a lot every year, but it's continues to be true that the guys you're going to find on the waiver wire are just of a higher quality than the guys you're going to find in 15-teamers. If you're in a 15-team league, and you're picking 13th, 14th, 15th, and you take two of these guys, I'd kind of like to see how that build ends up. And once we start ramping up the mock drafts on the channel, I'd probably end up picking both of them just once or twice just to see if I could make it work. Because if you do have Skubal and Crochet or Skubal and Skenes, however you want to pair them, that does set you far and away ahead in the pitching stats. And then you can just focus on hitting for the next 8 or 9 rounds. Is there a clear order for these three, Kelly? I personally have them Skubal, Crochet, just a hair ahead of Skenes because I think that Skenes could potentially win 7 games, even if he throws 200 innings. Thank you, Pittsburgh. Crochet just gives me that higher floor of win production. If you're not playing in a league with wins, if it's a points league, then maybe it's a little bit different. But if we're talking standard category here, Kelly, is there a clear order for these three pitchers?
I would put them in the same order, not just because I have a very strong affliction for left-handed pitchers, but I think maybe Joe Pisapia has gotten in my head a little bit about Paul Skenes. He throws so hard, and the risk of needing a Tommy John surgery for pitchers who throw like that is pretty high. And so with Skubal and Crochet, having kind of already come back from their injuries and have settled in a little bit, I would take one of those two. Plus, the win equity is just not even. That's, can you make an argument that you would want someone like a Yamamoto over Skenes? Just in case, like you're talking about, they're so bad. So I don't know, but I would take either of the lefties first.
From a talent perspective, I think Yamamoto probably should be that fourth pitcher, but he threw so many innings last year. He threw an additional about 30 plus innings. I mean, every time he threw in the playoffs, it was 9 innings. Not something I'm ready to talk about yet. You haven't picked up on that. I'll probably never be ready to talk about that though. So we have to just get over it at some point. He was brilliant in the playoffs, but that's a lot of extra innings. He's going to the WBC. The Dodgers, like we mentioned earlier, are not going to be a team that says, yep, you're going to throw 220 innings this year, because it doesn't make sense for them to do that. I think I have Yamamoto 5th or 6th right now. That just worries me a little bit about how many innings we're going to see. Is he going to be able to stay healthy? It kind of reminds me a little bit of Zach Gallen a couple of years ago, who was considered a top 10 pitcher. Arizona makes a deep run, and then Zach Gallen hasn't really been the same. Now, I think Yamamoto's a better pitcher, but that's kind of generally where my brain goes after a season with so many innings. And Yamamoto is a guy that I believe has been pretty close to the first round. And in fact, minimum pick is 14, and a lot of these leagues are 15-team leagues on the NFBC. So there are times when people are willing to take him in the first. I can't really see it though, Kelly. I really can't.
No, and my only comparison on it was just sort of that idea of not you should never draft for wins, but it's also been a rare day, I think, where we've had someone so clearly not going to get wins as we are with Skenes, that especially after this year, it's like I'm not suggesting Yamamoto is a better pitcher, but in terms of what, if you look at it all around, is Yamamoto in the conversation? But that was all.
Oh, Yamamoto, like talent-wise, I think he's in that vicinity for sure. But just the situation with the Dodgers gives me a little bit of pause. Let's talk about those hitters that were kind of mixed into this range. Corbin Carroll, ADP, just shy of 8. It's at 7.8. Ellie De La Cruz at 8.8. Ronald Acuna Jr., 9.3. He'll be an interesting topic of discussion. And then Julio Rodriguez, 9.9. So these four players are separated by only 2 picks on average. They really are getting mixed and matched. Let's start with Acuna. We know what he is at his best. Are we sure we're going to get that? And is it worth the risk in the first round, passing up on other guys here who are all solidified first-round talents at this point, Kelly? Is it worth the risk?
It's not for me. I wrote up his profile and looked at all the numbers, and it was that whole idea of, okay, if we're embracing the knowledge that anyone can get hurt at any time, then, if you're able to let go of that idea, then sure, whatever. I'm a little afraid in terms of like his stolen bases or, are we going to lose one of these things? And we for sure have seen his best year, I believe. So for me, I don't think we've seen Corbin Carroll's best year. So I would much rather have Carroll than Acuna. And yeah, I think I would just look elsewhere just because of the unknown. I don't want him in the first round. If he were to somehow fall to the second round, like on a turn, if I have the last pick, then I would be more interested in him.
Yeah, he is so hard to figure out who he is from a health standpoint and from a profile standpoint, because that 2023 season is such an outlier. The thing that really stands out, aside from the 73 steals, is the 11% strikeout rate. Every other year of his career, he's been between 23, 25, 26%. And he goes down to 11%. He has one of the best fantasy seasons, one of the best offensive seasons in history, but he's kind of paid the price for it, maybe. I don't know how much of the injuries to the knees you can attribute to how much he's ran, especially that year, but 95 games in 2025, he only stole 9 bases. Could he get back up into the 20s and 30s? Steamer hasn't projected at 21 steals in 143 games. So they don't think he'll be running at his peak, and projections are generally more conservative. But I kind of have to agree that you got to expect maybe 20 steals from him, maybe 25. If things break right, then maybe you get 50 from him, but you can't expect it. I think you can expect good offensive production, but I have to agree that his best season is probably in the rear view, Kelly.
Yeah, and that's just where I'm looking. I mean, he's a dynamic player. I think he will contribute in all 5 categories without any problem. But again, like we talked about, that kind of higher floor. But like, I want my first round pick to be. I want to be as confident in that pick as I possibly can be. And Acuna is not it for me.
Yeah, I think, because I play in a ton of leagues, there might be 1 or 2 times where I do end up saying, you know what, I want to take Ronald Acuna here. I'll take the chance on him. One thing I can say about him is I can see him being, I think the first round is fairly solidified in terms of who's going where. If we get to spring training and Acuna steals 6 bases in the first week of spring training, I could see people pushing him into a group of 3 at the top with Ohtani and with Judge, maybe jumping over Bobby Witt. If we get indications that he is running again, I could see people getting really, really excited. And already, because I mentioned the NFBC shows you the minimum pick for a player, the highest they've been drafted, Acuna's already been taken 3rd overall by some brave soul here in the winter months. Maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't, but I could really see some helium coming for him depending on what we see in the spring. I wanted to talk about Julio Rodriguez because I feel like the narrative around him is that he is kind of not as good as he really is. Like, Julio Rodriguez is a 5-win player every year. He's on a Hall of Fame trajectory, but I think it's because he starts off slowly, pretty regularly in his career, that people maybe who zone out at the end of the year, maybe the more football-oriented people, will say, Julio, he just never gets it done. Every year of his career, it does seem to be drastic first half, second half splits. 114 WRC plus in the first half in his career, a 737 OPS, not terrible, but not elite. In the second half, a 902 OPS with a 154 WRC plus. Is this something that we care about at all? Speaking specifically to head-to-head players who maybe by the time Julio heats up in a given year, they may already be out of the race for the playoffs. It's not something I really care about, but is it something that head-to-head drafters need to keep in mind, you think?
Yeah, I was just going to say that when I wrote his profile, I'm basically like, if you play in a roto league, don't hesitate. Like, whatever. Maybe Julio Rodriguez across the span, no problem. I kind of care about it just because, again, if we're picking him in the first round and he has such fluctuations, it's the idea of anyone who has Julio. Like, I think last year we were like, anyone who has Julio who made the playoffs are really doing well now, right? But like, did they make the playoffs? If your first rounder just does this for the first 3 months of the season, it makes it harder to, I think, gain that type of leverage that you want. So in a roto, I would have no issue with him at all. In head to head, kind of that same. And I know I just keep saying it, but I'm like, if he's there at the turn, maybe. But like in head to head, it's just difficult to say, yeah, I'm going to punt those 3 months, or sit and hate him and then love him and then hate him for 3 months. So
he's a guy for me where if I draft him, even if he's cold, I know the second he's on the bench, that's a 3 homer, 4 steal week. So it's just so hard when the talent is that high. The divide for me is that I used to be predominantly a head-to-head player when I first started playing fantasy. Wasn't really huge into roto. It was more head-to-head points. Now it's almost exclusively roto with a head-to-head home league. But I have more of the roto brain. I remember a couple years ago, Trey Turner's first year in Philly, and he was god-awful for the first half of the year. They did the whole standing ovation thing for him, and he turned it around. And I remember saying something in the offseason along the lines of, Trey Turner had a great year. And I had a lot of head-to-head players saying, no, he did not have a great year. I missed the playoffs. He was my first-round pick. He had a horrible year. So there is kind of a divide between what format you're playing. If you're in a roto league and somebody does have that mindset of, the first half, you don't care if it all comes in April or August or June or whenever it comes, because it's coming with Julio. Every year it's essentially been a 30-30 floor. And the projections are 30 homers, 23 steals from Steamer, like I mentioned, a little bit more on the conservative side. Anything to say about Elly De La Cruz, Kelly? He was horrendous in the second half of the season. Now, we've heard that he was dealing with some kind of injury. I believe it was to his shoulder, but my God, in the second half of the year, an 80 WRC plus. He was 20% worse than league average, 4 second half homers. I personally don't really like him as a first rounder just because the lower batting average floor. I'm not really sure if he's a fully polished product yet. He's kind of a fade for me in the first round, I got to be honest.
Yeah, I did my first series of rankings, and I mean, rankings are what they are, but I don't have him in the first round. In fact, I think I had him closer to the third round.
Okay.
And it's because of that. Like, he went from 67 steals to 37 steals. And that's kind of, you were thinking like 30-30 or 30-50 or 25-50. Like, that number was never below 50 in my brain for him stealing last year. So like those 37 were so short in comparison. He struck out less, but are we sure that that's going to stick? I don't know. He was so bad. And if it's an injury related thing, that's okay. But there's the opposite, right? Like, he gets you to the playoffs and then he just disappears. So for me, I don't like him in the first round, and I think it's kind of back to that shortstop thing. There's a couple other shortstops I would definitely rather have than him. So I can't rank him in the first round and then be like, no, here are 3 other shortstops I'd prefer to have. So it's he's a tough one for me.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the year-to-year plate discipline data, and the strikeout rate did go down, which is noticeable. It's gone down in each of his first couple of seasons from 33 to 31 to 25. But below the surface, there's not a lot to support that. The zone contact rate is about the same. It was 94 and change up to 81. Slight improvement, but nothing significant. Still below league average. He chases at the same rate. His swinging strike rate is the same. So I don't know that he is necessarily the guy that we were thinking he was going to be. Now, maybe part of it's injury related, but I think that there is something to say about him being similar to O'Neal Cruz. Not, I know it's kind of lazy. They got the same name, whatever, but it's not that. It's that they hit the crap out of the ball, but they're ant killers. They hit it into the ground constantly. 51% ground ball rate. It doesn't really matter how hard you hit it. Welsh and I talked a lot about O'Neal Cruz and some of the problems, and they're very similar. It doesn't matter how hard you hit it if it's on the ground more than half of the time. He might just be a low 20s homer guy unless he can lift the ball, and we haven't really seen an indication of that. In fact, the launch angle went down a little bit this past year. Again, could be injury related, but when you also look at the fact that everybody going around him is a batting average boon, and he is a guy who could hit 230 in a given year. So I think that he is, of anybody going in the first round, probably the biggest fade for me. I know it's hard to, win your draft in the first round, but you can kind of lose it a little bit if you really don't get that first round production you're expecting. Guys, the FantasyPros Draft Wizard is something you should be knowing about. Championships are won at the draft, and that's where the Draft Wizard gives you the edge. You can sync your league in seconds and run realistic mock drafts using your exact settings. Our tools show you who you should take next, and the odds your favorite players will still be on the board. If you're in a pinch, just ask Coach for real-time advice tailored to your draft. Plus, you can view player news, projections, and build your own tiered cheat sheet. Draft like a pro with the Fantasy Pros MLB Draft Wizard at fantasypros.com/MLB Draft Wizard. 2 more tiers to go through here, Kelly. This one is an interesting one for me. It's a group of guys that I'm not really targeting. I got to be honest. It's the new faces. It's Junior Caminero, it's Nick Kurtz, and it's Cal Raleigh, guys who had explosive 2025 seasons. It may be shocking to some people. Maybe this is the first podcast you're listening to, and you're thinking, Nick Kurtz is a first-round pick? He is some of the time. His ADP is right around 17, but his minimum pick is 8. There are people who are that bullish on him, Kelly. Let's start with a general look. Do any of these players deserve to be firmly first-round targets for you?
No, not firmly. I think you can just, again, yeah, you pay if you play in 100 leagues. I could take Nick Kurtz if it's a 15-teamer. I could take Nick Kurtz in the first. I do not want Cal Raleigh in the first. I think we've seen you don't want to draft somebody at their peak and then watch the next year go by. And Caminero, I love Caminero, but they're not playing in that park again. And so, when they're moving back to the hitters wasteland, so it's kind of like, I feel like that's the thing for me with him. Whereas Kurtz gets to keep playing in the minor league park that he can bunt out of. So it's, I like Kurtz the best of the 3. But no, I don't think any of them are firm first rounders.
Yeah, I like Kurtz a lot, but the price is just too expensive. There's a certain first baseman who plays in Toronto that I'll talk about in a few minutes that I think is, just as good, if not better than Kurtz, and he's going 10 picks later. Caminero, the home and away splits last year were quite drastic. He was about a league average hitter away from home, and they were playing at George Steinbrenner Field, the minor league park that the Yankees play at. They loaned them out because the Trop was damaged. I think it was a hurricane. So away from the minor league park, it was a 743 OPS, 100 WRC plus, exactly league average. At home, he was a god, 954 OPS, 160 WRC plus. Now, the home run distribution was fairly similar, 22 at home, 23 away, but I really worry about what to expect going back to a poor park. He hit 218 away from home last year, and his on-base percentage was 266. That's bad stuff.
Yeah.
Now, I do think one last point about him is that down the stretch, it did seem like he improved as a hitter in August, 944 OPS, 969 in September and October. And they were playing quite a bit on the road by that point of the season, too. So I think that he did progress as a hitter, but to the point where I want to take him in the first round, I can't do it.
No, even with third base being like, I think he's a solid second rounder that I'd be willing to go with. Yeah. Like, I feel like, yep, I think he should be the second third baseman off the board. I have no issue with any of that, but I'm just not going to do it in the first round. Even in a 15-teamer, of the 3, he's the one that I would take the last because of those numbers were so kind of iffy, and we just don't know for sure what we're going to get with him. But yeah, no, with the third base, that bumps him in the second round, no problem for me at all.
Cal Raleigh is also an interesting one, and it kind of depends on your format. If you're playing in a 1-catcher league, then the price will be a little bit lower than this. The NFBC, it is a 2-catcher. You start 2 catchers. So think of it almost like a super flex fantasy football. 1 quarterback leagues, you can take your pick later on. When you need 2 of them, people start to get aggressive. Cal Raleigh could have a 30 home run year where he drives in 90 runs and hits 240. And it'd be a great season, and it'd be a thorough disappointment in the first round. If you look exactly what he did in 2024 or 2023, really good seasons, that's probably what you should expect. Is he going to hit 60 again at Safeco? I always call it Safeco. It's not Safeco anymore. It's T-Mobile. Is he going to hit 60 home runs there again? I probably would say not. And I think most people play in 1-catcher leagues. If you play in 2-catcher leagues, it's really tricky because you can end up with Bo Naylor as your first catcher if you're not careful. But most people are playing in 1-catcher leagues, and I think you can punt there pretty easily, and you don't need to take a second-round Raleigh, or in some cases even a first-rounder. He is going in the first round occasionally. I want nothing to do with it.
No, I got burned. I got burned so hard on Gary Sanchez the year after his giant year, and I took him, I think, first pick, second round. Like I was on the turn, and I was like, yes, I'm going to shore up catcher. Like they're done, right? No, I'm never drafting catchers high again. Just like anytime I even kind of draft one high, I feel like they fall apart. And Cal is a terrible example. I mean, I have him in a lot of keeper leagues just because I was like, I'll take the 30 homers and I'll figure out batting average later. But I feel like that's what we're going to go back to is exactly who he was prior to now, which is a great catcher, but I want nothing to do with him in the first round. I don't really want anything to do with him in the second round. So it's not worth it. Like even in a 2 catcher league for me, if you have to pick him that high, I'm like, there's a different set I would go after than him and someone else.
Yeah, buying low and selling high is always, framed as an in-season trading thing, but it also applies to drafts a little bit. You're buying high on these players after a big year. You want to be looking in drafts at players who maybe had a little bit of a disappointing season last year, buy the dip on them. When you're buying high, especially for the 2 guys, Kurtz and Caminero, who both essentially it wasn't technically Caminero's rookie year, but it might as well have been. There's no track record to fall back on. At least with Raleigh, you can say, okay, I'm getting 30 homers here. I know that the raw power, even in a bad park, I'm getting 30 homers. Maybe Nick Kurtz, hits 24 homers next year and hits 240, even in a good park. We just don't have an established baseline of what he really is. Look at Zach Geloff after his first year. We thought he was going to be like a 30-30 guy.
Yep.
And now he's a, AAA fodder, essentially. Yeah. So you just never know after a big first year. So I think that they're all generally fades. Caminero pick 14, Kurtz and Raleigh are both going around pick 17. The last group we're going to look at is guys who are kind of borderline first and second rounders. If you're looking at their minimum selection, a lot of the time they have gone in the first. They're not always. They're kind of, you never really know in a given room where they're going to go. It's Gunnar Henderson, ADP of 17. Kyle Tucker, an ADP of 18.5. Jackson Churio, 19.9. And Vladimir Guerrero at 20 on the dot. Kelly, are any of these guys first rounders for you, according to your evaluations and rankings?
I really like Gunnar Henderson for a bounce back year. So I don't think you have to take him in the first, but he's one of the shortstops I would list ahead of Ellie for me. Where I feel like his floor is safer. I feel like he had that injury last year that really kind of kicked off his season poorly, and it took him a very long time to come back around. And I just think as long as he's healthy, that we're going to get a huge bounce back year from him. So I'm interested in him. Again, I think he's fine in the second round. You don't have to overpay, because I feel like people, are also going to look at his numbers and kind of be like, whatever. And of course the Kyle Tucker question is, where is he going to be? And how much does that influence? Do you think his ADP will go up when he signs, like if he signs somewhere friendly, or do you think it won't matter at all?
I think it's just the nature of fantasy players. For some reason in the back of the head, when a player is not signed, even when it's a great player, I think with Kyle Tucker, it's going to sound ridiculous, but like maybe he'll never sign. Maybe, and when you don't know, when you see free agent next to a name, we see it every year with great players, and it's not going to be a drastic jump because he's already borderline first, second rounder. But I think he'll be a firm first rounder, and I hope you're listening to this in February saying, Joe, what are you talking about? Kyle Tucker signed with the Blue Jays 6 weeks ago. What do you think? As of today, he's a free agent, but I think wherever he signs, optimistic Blue Jay fan here thinking he'll be in Toronto. But what are the other options? The Mets, the Dodgers, maybe the Yankees. Like he's not going to to Pittsburgh or to Minnesota or something. No shade to Minnesota, but he's not going to a team where it's like a poor-ish lineup around him.
Right.
He's going to a top 5 or 7 lineup in the league. So wherever he signs, I think he's going to go up a couple picks. I took him in my first draft. I was picking 14th, I think 13th, and I paired Tucker and Lindor. I don't know how many times I'm going to be able to do that going forward. I think we're right in the window now where Kyle Tucker signed, where Juan Soto and Shohei Ohtani signed, like a couple of weeks into December. We'll probably know sooner than later. And if you're getting him in the second round now, I don't expect that to continue. Do you have a preference between Tucker and Gunnar?
Well, so I'm a Cubs fan, right? So I had Tucker to cheer for last year. And he's so good. But his health has been an issue a little bit. And, even coming over from Houston, it's this, I don't know if he doesn't report it or cause it's like he played with a broken pinky for a couple months. So I think I would still lean Henderson. But if I don't like Henderson over Lindor, so like that's another one. Lindor is also for me ahead of Ellie. Just again consistency. So I would go with one of those two over Tucker as of right now. Now he lands in Toronto, then I think you should draft him with your first overall pick. But for right now, no, I think I would go with one of those two shortstops over him.
Shortstop is just so incredibly deep. Outfield being rather scarce in a 5 outfielder format, especially if it's a 3 outfielder 12-team league, then it's fine. You don't need to be pushing outfielders up so much there. But if you're in like a 15-team 5 outfielder league, that's a lot of my formats. They go quick, and you're starting some pretty ugly names pretty quickly. So Jackson Chourio becomes pretty appealing as a guy who, I mean, right off the bat, coming up to the major leagues, was not overmatched in any way as a 20-year-old. He may have even been 19 when he first debuted, but this past season in 131 games, 21 and 21, he hit 270. He feels like a guy we could be talking about in a year as a top 6 or 7 pick. He could go 35, and I wouldn't be surprised by it.
Yeah, I laughed when I wrote I wrote the outfielder profile, so I've got them all like sitting there. And yep, he went 21 and 21 last year. He went 21 and 22 in 2024. Like the numbers were scary similar. And he did take a little bit of a step back he slashed a little bit lower, but his slugging was still 1 point off. So if it continues to grow, I think that, yeah, absolutely, for sure. I think we get a 25-25 season this year. I wouldn't 30-30, I think is perfectly possible as well. It just really, it was so interesting to see those numbers were just so completely close. And he played 17 fewer games last year than the year before. So, he should have had more. He just wasn't in the lineup for as much. But yeah, I think he's easily the next outfielder off the board. But I would pick Tucker over him if we're going, like, if we're doing this whole, like, who would you rather have game. Yeah. I would pick Tucker over Chourio.
I think I would go Tucker. And you mentioned the injury stuff with Tucker. I don't know what to expect. I think that it's fluky stuff. They didn't find a fracture or something. They missed a fracture. And then the Astros the year prior, I don't even remember what exactly was the case, but he was expected to be day-to-day. It was like a bone bruise, I think, and he missed 4 months after that. So he's had a bit of a tough run of luck, which is probably why he's in the second round. But another guy who could go 30-30, and I wouldn't really be surprised by it. I think he's slightly over Jackson Chourio, but they're neck and neck for a reason. We'll end off with somebody from my neck of the woods, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. with his ADP of 20. Now, he is going behind Nick Kurtz pretty consistently. Nick Kurtz's ADP it's getting closer, actually, if you look at all drafts, 17 compared to 20, but generally speaking, Kurtz goes off the board first. I say that is nonsense because Vladimir Guerrero Jr., after what we saw in the playoffs especially, I think he's going to be expected to carry things over. Maybe not to that same degree where he's hitting a home run every other at bat. But even if you just look at the steamer projections, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is projected ahead of Nick Kurtz in all 5 of the standard categories with a 40-point bump in batting average as well. A very hard category to come by later in drafts. I might be called a homer. I probably will be. But Vladdy will be my number 1 first baseman entering 2026.
Yeah, he's my number 1 first baseman by a fair amount, I think. And it's the batting average really kind of kicks that over. He's hit that stride in his career. I drafted him a lot of places last year, hoping he was going to do I'm going to play unbelievable for my contract. And then they gave him the contract in April. And then he had a power outage for a couple months. And I was like, well, that didn't work out perfectly. But his final numbers and the way he played for the rest of the year, I was just like, yeah, this is, I think with Freeman kind of starting to decline, and Kurtz doesn't have enough of a resume yet that I would feel like, yeah, I'm for sure taking him. I would rather have Vladdy. And I'm not a homer, so I guess we're in agreement on that.
I could maybe even be talked into taking Pete Alonso over Nick Kurtz at this point. I think it's close. It's closer than the ADP would suggest, with like a 15-pick difference between them. Kelly, have we missed anybody? I think we've covered pretty much everybody who goes in the first round. Have we missed anybody that you wanted to chime in on?
No, that's pretty much the list, and exactly kind of how I broke it down. I feel like you and I are in a lot of agreement, which makes for a super interesting podcast. I should have argued with you and yelled at you more, but No, I mean, I think the biggest question is what do you want to do with the pitchers and what do you want to do with the shortstops? Those are your, who are you willing to take and who are you sacrificing as a result of it?
I will put it in my calendar for November of 2026. Remember to argue with Kelly on our next podcast. I hope we get to do one again sooner than that. I want to leave you with one final question. Do you have a favorite spot to pick? If you have a league where you can choose your draft order, is it a year where you just want to pick first and get Ohtani, pick at the end and get two of these borderline first-round players? Do you have a preference?
It's so funny because I played in my home league only for a pretty long time, and I'm the commissioner of that league. And so I got so used to, we choose our draft pick based on how we finished the last year. So like if you finish last, you get to pick your draft pick first. And I would always, if I could, pick the last pick of the first round. And at first I thought I was doing it because I was commissioner, so it was easier for me to do the other things I was doing during the draft because I had that long gap in between. But I think at this point, especially in the first round, I'm like, yeah, I want the 12th and 13th best players off the board. And I feel like someone always falls to like that area. And then it's like you really kind of almost get two first round picks. So yeah, if you give me the choice, I want to be on the turn. I'll be first either too. That's fine. I'll take Ohtani, but get me out of that 6th and 7th spot. I hate those. So where do you fall?
Well, my first draft, I drew the 13th pick and I thought, oh my God, really? Like this is where I'm starting off the year. But the more I think about it, and that's in a 15-team league, the more I think about it, I kind of like it for that same reason. Maybe you get Acuna and like Kyle Tucker to start your draft, which I feel would be really, really good. Even if you don't really love Ellie and the low batting average, maybe you take Ellie and Vladdy, and then you get the batting average and the stolen bases kind of taken care of and evened out. Like there's a lot of cool combinations at the end of the first. I said I did Lindor and Tucker, but you could do Lindor and Tatis. You could do Crochet and Gunnar Henderson. There are so many cool combinations, and there's a high probability of landing on two first rounders at the end there. Guys, this has been a lot of fun. Make sure you are subscribing to the channel. Let us know below, who are you taking in the first round? Who are you fading? Who are guys that you think are going way out of the first round that you think could maybe end up there in 2027 drafts? That's the way you got to look at it, right? Who's going to perform this year? Who are we going to be taking early next year? But for Kelly Kirby, I'm Joe Orrico. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Fantasy Pros Baseball Podcast. Take care, everybody.